Welcome for the webinar today, where we are about to talk about the metadata and all its importance and all the good and great things about how this can be achieved and whatnot, right? So, thank you for your time today, and I welcome you all for this session. I am Harsha Kotha RajendraPrasad. I am part of Platform 3 Solutions. I am part of the pre-sales and implementation team and have been associated with Platform 3 Solutions for almost 8+ years right now. And today's topic is going to be is your metadata enough to make your data self-standing, right? So metadata, right? So it's a very important aspect in terms of data, in terms of anything that you would probably think about in a digital world, right? So this is all it's going to be discussed today in terms of how metadata is going to be the key item or an aspect which makes a good strategy in terms of managing your data and whatnot, right? So with that quick brief, let's get going. So we just started to say that metadata is very important, right? And metadata is going to be the key of the hour, which means that we cannot ignore metadata anymore as and when we are embracing the digital growth, digital world. Um, in these days, anything you take is digital, right? So what that means is there is a lot of data that gets into a format and in a way that needs a better organizing the data and things like that, right? And so far, people probably would have thought about metadata as an aspect, as an add-on, or as an something a layer top of the data that they have, right? But going forward, the pattern is going to change. Basically, in terms of why we cannot just ignore the metadata anymore and why it is very important, right? So in terms of data growth, right? So we know there is a huge data growth in every aspect of the world, be it with large enterprises, be it with any organization, or be it even with small or any type of any level of businesses, right? So as and when there are a lot of things getting digitized, which means that our data growth is going to be exponential, right? What does that mandate or what does that tell you, right? So we will need to have a strategy to cater our data growth in terms of knowing the context of the data, right? So context is one of the way of setting up the metadata as well, right? So as and when your data grows, you'll also need to have a way you are able to set some context, some connecting points within this data sets so that you are able to easily manage the data growth and you are not pushed into a situation where you are getting accountable for certain aspects of data related discrepancies, right? So that is one thing that we need to probably highlight here. And absolutely on in terms of audit regulations and complaints, right? So these are something that keep evolving, right? As and when we are embracing the data growth, there are certain regulations or complaints aspects that keeps getting added to the way we store the data, the way we handle the data, maybe with respect to certain sensitive data sets. For example, any personally identifiable information, or one level deeper, if there is a data set that has got a little more health relevant information, or any type of data that probably needs a compliance or a regulation requirement. For example, recently in India, we are talking about DPDPA Act, and that is just a starting point, right? So the DPDPA Act is just in there, but as and when we move ahead in the future, there will be more angles to it, meaning the scrutiny on the data that is going to stay within the systems and applications will be very much tightened. And this is all because of all various types of threats and things like that, right? So we keep hearing that a large enterprise or some part of the data was exposed to the outer world and a lot of bank information was exposed and things like that, right? So in order to keep all these in control, to a great extent, metadata will help you, right? So that's what we are trying to portray. And when in terms of managing the data growth, and as and when the technological advancements happen in terms of using applications, in terms of using versions of applications, managing the on-premise applications versus cloud applications. So what this brings in to any enterprise or anybody who is handling the data is a additional layer of complexity in terms of managing the data, right? So what people do, migrate an application from version 1 to version 2, version 2 to 3, right? So these kind of activities keep happening because of the rapid evolution of technology in terms of features, in terms of security, in terms of whatnot, right? And this again mandates the customers and the businesses to manage their data in such a way that they are not left behind. They need to move along with the world, right? So that mandates that they either keep the data in a way that it is future proof, or they have to migrate it, or probably they have to archive it, right? There will be certain options, and having a clear metadata aspect to this kind of data set in will help us to manage probably the future proofing of the application as such, right? And coming to the talk of the hour, right? Like everybody talks about AI, everybody talks about how Gen AI can help you, or how the models, AI models can help you. But for us to have these to be readily be run on top of our data, the first step that you have to need to do is keep a complete good metadata part of the data, so that that becomes your building block and you can build on top of it, right? So certainly, as and when you have a very great metadata aspect, what that means is your benefits with respect to running AI or any analytical workloads becomes easier and becomes much more fruitful, right? So you are not just shooting in the dark, right? So you are running on something that you already are pretty much sure about, and the outcomes can be really different, right? So as and when you have a very knowledgeable, or a, I would probably call as a complete metadata of your data set, the analytical or the AI loads workloads will give you a better outcomes, right? So you will be able to probably have a better results out of your AI mechanisms and things like that, right? So that is how we started. So basically, metadata is an aspect which probably will have to be taken into account in any of the aspects that you start interacting with your day-to-day data or any applications, because sooner or later we will have to embrace this. If not, we will be able to we'll be able to probably be not scaling up with the technological advancements, but there could be a lot of challenges while we're doing that. All right. So now we were talking about, right, metadata, right? So what is metadata, right? So to understand what is metadata, so these are few simple plain English terminologies, right? So anything that describes your data can be a metadata, right? Simply, right? So even a textbook, you probably have an index as your first page, right? That is also a angle of metadata, right? So that is where you start and you can go and navigate your chapters in that book and things like that. Similarly, just think about if you have a single book, you are able to just scan and you are able to pick the data that you want from that particular book. But you have a library, it becomes a metadata which has the collection of all these books and probably one more layer of metadata to that, right? Similarly, when you have different applications working in an organization which is performing different business functions, some can be running HR functions, some can be running your code processing, some can be running your logistics, right? So metadata in a simple term is something that describes a little deeper of what that particular data set is all about, right? So that is what a metadata is probably at the first, right? And next, so that is the first level, right? So when we are able to add additional information about what is sitting in there, right? So You probably tell that this is my this business unit's data, so that can be your fundamental metadata attribute, and you can go as deep as you would want, right? So we can go data point, we can collect and manage data points as much as needed. So it is all about creating a very good metadata which gives a clear context of what type of data that is sitting in. And whenever I say the data, it is inclusive, right? All inclusive, right? Types of data, structured, unstructured, or semi-structured, or any type of data sitting anywhere, right? So the data that is sitting anywhere will need to be probably added with more attributes when you probably start managing that. So the first thing that you have is, as soon as you have your foundational data's understanding and probably getting what type of governance could be applied and what type of accesses and things like that can be applied on top of the data, right? So that could also be an angle of metadata, right? So all this will be like level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So you'll have multiple attributes and all these can be part of your metadata. All right. So we now know what is metadata, why is it important, right? So now, if you want to make your metadata self-standing, what does it take, right? So what does self-standing means is, assume that you have a very large data set and you are not able to know what nitty-gritties are sitting within that particular data set, and it becomes really challenging for you to decide whether what to be done with that particular data set, right? So, suddenly somebody can come and ask you, give me so and so data from that particular data set. I know that that data is sitting within that data set, but I don't know how to pull it, right? What does that mean to us, right? So it means that we have to scramble through that data, try to see the relevant details, what was requested for, and probably take XYZ time and try to stitch something together, right? So in the other world, when you have a defined metadata, it becomes very simple, right? You know that probably the person asking something is from this function and probably this area and things like that. So when you have metadata, which also encapsulates all these details, it will be very easy for you to pick those data and then get it back to the requester, right? So a self-standing metadata means that you have a very good base which has a clear detail of all the data that is sitting within your data set, and you are able to just navigate through the data in terms of metadata, right? So that is what it is. It's not like you put a strong effort, try to understand what things are and what to do with that. That's not the case, but rather you have a smaller place where you can start with and you can go as deep as possible, right? So that is what a clean self-standing metadata could be, right? So just like, let's say there is a book, for my prior example that I was talking about, a book. So if I take a book, if I have already read the book, I know exactly, probably I can remember for like this chapter has so and so details, right? Similarly, we will have the metadata to help us. So compare a person who has already read the book and the person who has not read the book, right? So the person who has already read the book will know the details of where the chapters are and how the chapters are interrelated and things like that. And just taken another person who has not read the book for the first time. So it is going to take for the second person a little more time to understand the nitty-gritties and then to understand, right? So now think the metadata is the person who knows what is there in that book, right? So which means that any person who has already read the book or not, he can just use that metadata and start looking at the data and trying to understand what it is, right? So it kind of gives you a insider knowledge without having to rely upon a pre-existing person's knowledge or anything of that sort, right? So that is what it is going to be. And this metadata helps you to survive migrations, right? So I was talking about, we need to keep catching up with the technological advancements, right? So what that means is we need to know exactly what part of my data is sitting in where, right? So that gives me an indication if in case if I have to do any migrations or any type of activity. So I am trying to future proof my application, right? So that is what a self-standing metadata is. And a complete, consistent, clear, right? So what that means is, I was talking about any enterprise having different functions and each functions having different applications that keeps running behind the scenes, right? So we need to have a unified and a complete consistent metadata, right? So with that, what we'll be able to achieve is do a certain level of activity on all the types of the data set and not pertaining to any one type of business function or any logic, but the same metadata concepts can be propagated to your rest of the data set as well, right? So that is what it means, right? So basically a complete, consistent, and clear metadata, right? So that is what will make you self-standing. And future proof, I keep saying that word multiple times. So basically what that means is it is a independent and ready. What that means is you have complete picture of what that data is all about, so that you can use that as a base and do a lot of other things on top of. All right. So now, when again going one step deeper into metadata, right? So there is no one size which will fit for everybody. Rather, there will be different types of metadata when different types of people interact with the data, right? So it could be classified into multiple types. So one could be technical. So probably a developer will be the closest person who will use these terminologies and things like that, right? Like what is the format? Are there any encoding? How is my data sitting in the storage and things like that? All right. And there could be something on the lineage. So lineage is like how complete my data is, how accurate my data is, probably a timeline, right? So at this point in time how my data was sitting, so at the later point in time how it got changed and things like that, right? So that could be one more. And something that defines the quality of the data, right? For example, completeness and things like, right? So the quality in the sense is, are there any data duplications, are there any overlapping of data and things like that. And operational, right? So operational can be like how the system was accessed, how the ETL activity has been done, how the operations, right? Basically the operational level details where how the system is handling the data at any point in time, right? And then is the most important aspect, which is business metadata. So for business, for a business team, the metadata concept could be a completely different when probably comparing with a technical background person. So for a business person, it could all be about context, right? So he could say, I have a customer who had purchased so and so in the year of 2020. Now he's again coming back to me, or what will I sell him, or what he's planning to buy. So all those can be in business context, right? So all these relevant details can also be part of the metadata. And usage metadata, right? Like who is accessing the data, how frequently they are looking at the data, whether any person is trying to access any part of the data frequently, or what type of data that is trying to access. All those kind of good stuffs, right? So that could be multi-dimensional details that all can fit under the umbrella of metadata, which means that there will be different attributes, like the one metadata could have multiple attributes, right? So each attribute can probably fit into one of these 6 items that is displayed in the screen. All right, and one step backward, right? So which means that when any time that we talk about metadata, there are two sides of it, right? So for each of the aspect that we were talking about, there are two sides, right? There is a definition based metadata, which is almost kind of fixed, right? So structured, basically business terms and things like that. And then there will be this other part which is descriptive, right? So I'll be able to talk about the behavior of the data, usage of the data, explain how the data was there and when it was there and things like that, right? So any metadata will probably have two sides to it. The first side is the definitional metadata, the other side is the descriptive metadata, meaning one more layer, right? So you have the data, you have metadata, and you will have probably two types there, definitional and descriptive. Descriptive is like you have like all the details needed for that particular data set, right? So there are two sides. And when we say metadata, both the aspects are very much important. This gives trust and transparency to anybody who is using the application, accessing the application and whatnot. All right. So again, talking about how the metadata needs will differ across teams. So IT teams probably will need a different set of metadata aspect. Similarly, data stewards who probably manage the data, right? So IT teams probably get the data in to the ground level and maintain that data. And data stewards are probably the data custodians, right, who will manage the data, and they probably are in between the tech and the business, right? So what they will be able to do is whatever the business team asks for, they will be able to relate that into an IT term and then be able to bridge the gap between the IT team and the business team, right? So that's what the data custodians do as well. And business users, right? Basically, they will probably need a complete context of a customer or an entity or a data record or whatever you want to call it. So based upon different business verticals or business functions, the terminologies can change, right? So, but the end idea is a business user will probably talk in terms of what he sees or interacts with the day-to-day happening, right? Like a customer, for example, right? So that is what different things. And compliance, right? So when compliance is something like managing the data in terms of who sees what, who has access to which part of the data, whether a certain group of data will be visible to this particular set of people or not, right? So all these comes into the umbrella of compliance and much more. Something like managing the data life cycle on the one hand, the other hand, probably make ensuring that there is a complete audit trail, right? So which is a key aspect, like when was the data modified, who modified the data, does he have any approvals to modify the data, things like all those, right? So all those small things probably could be under the um, umbrella of the compliance. All right. All right. Now we will probably talk about understanding metadata across different data formats, right? So I was talking about metadata being a holistic thing, not limited to one part or one application, but cutting across any place where there is data, right? So structured data. So structured data probably is the easiest part to solve, maybe, right? So something which can be clearly defined as fields has a relationship, right? So for example, if you have a customer record within a database, or probably if you have customer data sitting across your data sets, you know that that particular customer has an entry in his probably the customer entity, and as well in a transaction entity where he would have probably interacted with that particular application or any system in terms of using a product, buying a product, selling a product, any of that sort, right? And similarly, some volumes like sizes or lineage, right? So basically, all these come under the structured data, and there could be multiple levels of attributes as well associated with the structured data. The next is unstructured data, right? So the main demarcation between structured data and unstructured data is structured data will probably follow a scheme of things, right? So you always know that this particular data set will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So those probably can be termed as structured data, and unstructured data can be something which is free form, right? So something like Word documents and things like that, right? So you cannot probably fit in a structure within that, right? Like PDF documents or your images, for example, or any type of content, right? Audio recordings, video recordings, all those comes as unstructured data, right? So for these type of unstructured content, the simple building block of metadata could be something like what you are looking at on the screen, kind of file names, MIME types, tags, purpose, maybe attributes relevant to when it was created, when it was modified, and probably some others like whether what type of content it is or the type it is, like the extensions, right? So all these could be the first block, right? And if you have to go deeper, that could be based upon what type of data that we are handling. For example, if you want to do context-based searches, or if you want to strip at depth, strip in-depth metadata out of those content. So all those could probably be much complex metadata creation, but on a very simple terms, unstructured data could start from having a simple. So unstructured data, the basic metadata could be like as simple as its names and very basic stuff, right? And there could be certain type of data which is basically semi-structured, right? Probably a mix of both structured and unstructured. Certain part of the data probably can fall into a scheme of things, but not the full data set, right? Some level the hierarchical data sets, for example, or nested formats where you cannot just define it with a full scheme of things, but there could be something more attached to that particular data set, right? So we will need to probably have different metadata approaches for each of this type of data. All right. So next we will probably talk about the metadata gaps, right? So what if we are not able to collect a good piece of metadata, right? So what are the common gaps that people do, and what does it relate to, right? So outdated or incomplete documentation, for example, right? So this is, at least in my day-to-day activity, it's a very common happening wherein there is not a lot of knowledge left with those data sets or applications, wherein we keep running around the room or office, try to see who owns the data, basically, right? Or what the data set is all about, right? So there will be kind of outdated, or there will be no information in some cases as well. And probably people will think that, okay, I'll take a point in time approach. Probably I'll do manual entries on the metadata and try to keep certain record of what I have, which probably becomes very inconsistent, right? It's not going to be standard, which means that there's going to be a lot of effort to create that metadata as the first aspect. And second aspect, reading it and ensuring that you're getting value out of that particular metadata is really going to be challenging. And what this means, it's all siloed, right? So these metadata models are not talking to each other, which means that every metadata model is going to be separate, and understanding that metadata and cracking it and understanding itself becomes a challenge. And this will lead to having a like I was talking in the first point, right? So we will not be able to define a clear ownership. In fact, we will have a lot of gaps with respect to data governance and managing the data itself. All right. So we were talking all the while metadata is important. How what are the metadata aspects? How the metadata can be probably categorized, and what type of data needs metadata, right? And there has to be a level we have to say, okay, I have enough metadata, right? So when that is going to happen, right? So as and when you are able to answer these simple English questions, right? What, where, when, who, why, right? So if you are able to answer simple, relevant questions in plain English to any type of data set, that means that we are in a safe place and we have enough metadata. All right. And whether your metadata is searchable, whether there is a governance angle on top of the data metadata that you have, and do you have a repeatable process of metadata which is easily understandable by everybody, right? So that is when you say that your metadata is enough. And if you are not able to answer yes to any of these two questions, which means that there is a scope where you can enrich your metadata, right? So when I say enrich the metadata, meaning adding more attributes, adding more context, adding more insights to the data sets that you have in terms of metadata. It can be in any form, right? So we will also tell you how our platform will help you to do manage all this metadata. But the key is, unless you have a very good complete enriched metadata, what that means is we will be not able to manage our data sets in a better fashion. All right. All right. So we'll also talk about why metadata and compliance, right? So in terms of metadata, how ready we will be in terms of compliance, right? So we have a lot of push from regulatory authorities in terms of compliance, right? Managing the data. Basically, it is like how you manage other person's data, right? Or how you, since you are already in the journey of data growth, how are you ensuring that the data that you are handling is secure, right? So all these kind of question arises when we talk about compliance, and for us to be ready for facing any type of these compliance or regulation relevant aspect, we need to have a proper metadata, right? So metadata will help you to handle the data in terms of retention, protection, and all those kind of things, right? Probably retention and protection are two different things, but still it can be achieved using metadata. So retention is kind of not much, not less, right? So there could be a lot of sensitive data sets probably which will have a certain preset retention requirements, right? For example, your bank transaction records, for example, right? So the government or government bodies mandate or the regulations mandate based upon the geography that you have your customer information for a minimum of 3 years, right? The customer information and their transaction information for a period of 7 years, right? For example, I'm just putting the years there, but each regulation can have a different years of retention attached to it, right? For in the same terms, if there is a insurance agency which is selling insurance policies, there is the insurance regulatory authority, which will mandate you to have the data of those policies, how the policies were paid, and how the policies were maintained. All those have a legal tagging to it so that you maintain the data for the period that is needed, right? Which means that as a data owner or as an application owner, I am mandated to have the data for the time period that the legal entity mandates, right? For example, 7 years. So having data which is older than 7 years is also equally problematic when compared to not having certain part of the data. So which means that not too much, but not too little, but the exact amount of data or the exact time frame of the data needs to be managed so that we are always compliant, right, in terms of any regulations, right? So that is very important. And supports defensible deletion and rediscoveries, right? So what that means is we will be able to set up processes with the help of the knowledge of metadata. We will be able to set up processes which will help us to dispose the data in a manner that whatever data that needs to be held for certain regulatory requirement always stays in there, right? So we'll be able to achieve that easily. And when it comes to any audits or any traceability requirements or probably looking up historical data for various litigation or court cases or any of the of those requirements, right? Having a metadata which is complete will help you to adhere to all these regulations very easily and very quickly. All right, so one of my favorite topic, right? So the entire world is talking about AI, right? And for the AI to be very successful, very efficient, one of the key aspects is to have metadata in the right way, right? So AI can do a lot of things, right? But without metadata, you probably will not achieve the correctness and completeness as you would want to, or probably you will not be able to achieve the accuracy, correct? So having a clear metadata which actually has clear labels, right? So and we are just putting a name labels there, but probably having a way of adding attributes to the data will help your AI models to be more efficient, right? And when you have a very good metadata, what that means is you will have a lesser biased AI, you will have better accuracy, right? So that is what we have been trying to tell all the while. And it makes the models to run faster, efficient, and more quicker, and it helps to get attain your results very quickly. And we can probably use this on extended use cases in again tying back our requirements to legal and compliance requirements, right? So that is one thing that keeps evolving, right? So as and when we are embracing the digitization, probably going forward, you can pay with your I don't know, your identity card or probably your Aadhaar card, right? So it's more possible, right? So what that means is anybody interacting with these kind of systems will probably need to maintain the data in a more secured way. Unless you are not aware of what needs to be secured, what needs to be isolated from the rest of the data, it will be very daunting challenge to accomplish unless you have a clear metadata. All right, so probably we will need to look at the metadata as a long-term strategic data asset, right? It's not just going to be let's do it now and leave it. It's not going to be that way anymore. It is going to be an ongoing activity where we keep enriching our metadata in terms of attributes, in terms of depths, in terms of how we can use the metadata itself, and it is going to be a core part of your data strategy, right? So it's not going to be like you do once and it is done, or you cannot just say it is going to be my side project. Metadata at some point in time is going to become your core part of your data strategy, right? So this will help you to improve your discoverability, many benefits like that: security, reuse of data, ability to do things quicker and faster, right? And also probably not to have a dependency on data creators or original creators, right? So yeah, looks like we have a question. Probably I'll come back to that question. So when also talking about as a long-term asset, so directly we can set up our metadata models to certainly align with your governance, compliance, and all your access controls and whatnot, right? So it can cut across different requirements of the data sets, and then you'll be able to use it and leverage it as well, right? So probably metadata is going to be a strategic asset anybody who is dealing with the data. So I mean, for the past 35 minutes, we have been talking about metadata and how we are able to set the metadata, how to infer from the metadata types of things, right? But for us to get to this situation or this point, what it took, right? So we have been probably working with a lot of large enterprise customers, and exactly we know what are the challenges that different industries, different systems have been facing, especially with their legacy data, and sooner not later with their new day systems as well, right? So one of the key challenge that we have been facing day in and day out is the metadata challenge, which means that there is no clear indication of what is there in the data set, how to manage the data set, and how to basically treat the data itself, right? So then is where we started to build our expertise in terms of how we probably solve the data problem, data growth problem, data archival problem, right? So data technical debt problem, right? So that is when we started from ground up, right? So we were trying to see if there are ways where we can fasten the process of data understanding in terms of metadata and help the organizations in terms of offloading their historical records in with respect to archival and whatnot, right? So we have been into this journey for a long time now, and by doing this with multiple customers, large customers with multiple technologically different applications and systems, what we have understood is metadata is the core, right? So metadata is the key, so, right? And this makes that whatever forgotten, scattered, siloed data sets to be in one place, and having base metadata fully complete, fully rich, with a lot of attributes, which is repeatable, which is reusable, and which makes us easy to handle any type of data set, right? So all this comes as part of the experience as and when we interact with more applications, few applications ranging from very old legacy systems to new modern day systems, right? So I'll just show some of our clients that we have been working with over the multiple years now, and each of them are different, right? Each of them are trying to solve a different problem, but the key or the base that they are all lacking is they want to start at a good metadata, right? So that is what we are trying to portray. So with the vast experience of working with large enterprises, what is one thing that probably I would infer is everybody needs one repeatable process which talks about a complete metadata. And yeah, it can have multiple fancy names. People call data fabric, data mesh. It can be any terminology, but the essence is you have a clear complete metadata which becomes your building block, and you can build a lot of things with that, right? So that's what we are trying to say here. So this is how probably we will do it, right? So it's basically it is inside out, right? So when we talk about archiving the data, it's not just putting the data for compliance or just storing the data for future, right? But it is along with the data, you also add the attributes of metadata so that you have a metadata centric solution which can be extended, which can be used for extended use cases, right? It's not just for one problem solving. It could be like you can probably have multiple extended options on top of the data that you have, right? So now to just talk about how we help our customers on doing this is through our Archon suite of products, right? So Archon suite, it is basically a full complete platform, data management platform, which helps enterprises and organizations to manage their data growth in terms of multiple aspects. And the entire platform is metadata driven, right? Which means that you are trying to offload your technical debt as well. You are trying to future proof your data growth, right? So that's what we provide on the table. And we just don't move and archive the data, but we also preserve as part of our metadata aspects the meaning, context, and usability, and multiple dimensional attributes that also gets captured as part of the process. And okay, I'm seeing a question. I'll come back to the questions probably after 5 minutes. So this will one day help us to leverage the metadata, which could probably give a long-standing value, right? So that is how the data management platform will help us. All right. So I was talking about Archon suite of products. So now that we know that the importance of metadata, and coming back to the product suite, we have metadata as the backbone, right? So everything revolves around metadata. So there are multiple products that will help you to create those complete metadata points there, and which makes that you have a very repeatable process, right? So that's what we offer. And this makes self-standing metadata along with your data, which keeps your applications audit ready, which ensures that you are not facing a shutdown. Rather, you are making all the data available whenever needed. And obviously making data accessible whenever it is needed, right? So you're making the data future proof. All right, so as part of our product offering, we have 3 products. I'll just probably talk about 1 minute. Archon Analyzer, Archon ETL, and we have our Archon Data Store. So this completely becomes together, they ensure that metadata is the fundamental of the entire process or the data journey, which will help you to ensure that you are well within the realm of compliance. You are able to manage your internal or external data requests, or you are able to cater to any type of data request while you are securing the data in a very robust way and a repeatable process, right? So that is what we bring onto the table. And to talk about a very high level, we have multiple partners who also we tie up with and we work with, and we have many more also. All right, and with this, I'll probably pause, and I think we are having around 10 plus minutes. So I see there were like a few questions posted. Probably I'll take those. All right, so yeah, very interesting questions here, right? So how can I infer metadata in real life scenarios, right? So metadata can be a different aspect for different people, right? So for example, very simple, right? I always try to take an example of my kids who go to school, right? So which is easy for anybody to understand. For example, right, I was talking about the textbook. Similarly, when they have their entire textbook put in their bag, it becomes like they have like 12 textbooks, and whenever they want to probably pick a particular subject, they have a color coding added on top of those books, right? So they easily be able to, let's say, I ask them to pick a EVS book, they can just pull it out and then start looking at it, right? Instead of getting into everything or trying to run inside those other books and things like that, right? So that could be a very simple real life scenario that could probably be how a metadata can be helpful. And in a enterprise or a bigger picture, you will be able to go as deep as possible, right? So I was talking about one of the insurance use case, right? So the metadata can be as deep as, like, let's say you have a policy relevant information sitting in a data set. The metadata attributes can go as deep as who that policy was serving for, who actually is the beneficiary, right? And when that policy is that policy a health insurance, or is it a vehicle insurance or whatnot, right? So there could be a multiple angles to that in terms of categorizing and adding metadata attributes to a particular data set, right? Hope that helps. I'll pick one another question. If I have legacy application, what's the best way to extract metadata from it, right? So, I mean, it's a very obvious question, right? So we as the world keeps evolved in terms of technology, even new day applications will probably become legacy in the next 3-4 years, right? So that is how fast the technological advancements are happening, right? So which means that any application that holds the data probably can be a candidate which will also need metadata to be added on top of it, right? So there are multiple techniques available as part of our product offering and also as part of our best practices, which can be leveraged, which help us to extract the metadata from legacy applications, right? So there are multiple techniques, methods, and processes which can be followed to establish a complete metadata for that particular application. All right, hope that helps. All right, I see one other question. Regions you operate in. Yeah, so we have our presence across the globe. So we have offices in the US, we have offices in the UK, European region. We also operate our large delivery center from India, also a product development center in India. We are also present in Singapore, and also we are present in Australia. So what this means is we want to be available and provide the best of possible services and solutions to our customers across the globe. Please feel free to fill in your feedback. And I appreciate your presence today in this webinar, and look forward to catch you all up in the near future. Thank you. Have a good day and a good evening and a good weekend. Bye-bye.